Dr. James Baker, a man with noble posture and eyes that carried years of accumulated fatigue, sat aboard a plane bound for Italy. Behind him lay decades of surgical practice, endless night shifts, losses, triumphs, and one persistent thought. He no longer felt meaning. Patients had become numbers, procedures, routine mechanics, and life beyond the hospital seemed almost non-existent. He understood that if he didn't stop now, he would lose not only his profession, but himself. Italy greeted him with warm light, the scent of the sea, and a languid sense of ease. In a small southern village tucked among hills and vineyards, he rented a house, simply to breathe. As he wandered along the rural paths, he noticed an elderly man effortlessly trimming grapevines while softly humming a tune. His name was Gepe, an 87-year-old, remarkably spry, with a straight back, lively eyes, and no trace of frailty. He took no medication, never complained of pain, and managed daily tasks with confidence. Their acquaintance began with a smile and a gesture. Gepe invited James to dinner. That evening, under the shade of a grapevine pergola, with the sound of crickets in the background, they ate simple food, bread, olives, roasted vegetables, and drank dark, aromatic wine made by Gepe himself. His wife, Maria, lovingly tended the table, gently touching her husband's shoulder. Between them was something more than habit, a bond tested and strengthened by time. At some point, James noticed not once had Gepe mentioned illness, pain, or fear. He spoke of the land, the sun, his wife, and as he poured another glass, he said a phrase that seemed to tear through the veil. A little of this every evening. And love. It was said simply, but his voice carried a truth, as if drawn from life itself. Something stirred in James. He wondered, could it really be that simple? Not about pills, diets, or exercise schedules, but about wine and love? The thought wouldn't let him go. He was a doctor. He knew biology, chemistry, pathology. But that night, he longed to become a student of life. Not as a tourist, not as a weary man, but as a physician who wanted once again to understand what truly gives a person the power to live long, fully, and joyfully. And so this story began. Dr. James was not one to settle for surface-level guesses. The morning after dinner at Gepe's, he woke up early and went straight to the local shop to find out where that particular wine came from. It turned out Gepe grew his own grapes and made the wine himself. No additives, no preservatives, aged in a cool, quiet cellar. James bought a bottle to try, and then another, to run a chemical analysis. There was something special in that wine, and he wanted to understand what it was. Back in London 2 weeks later, he sent samples to the lab. The results surprised him. The wine was rich in polyphenols, powerful antioxidants naturally found in the skin and seeds of dark grapes. One of the key components identified in the analysis was resveratrol. This compound had already gained attention in the scientific community. It dilates blood vessels, reduces inflammation, and improves microcirculation. But the most fascinating aspect was its effect on hormonal balance. James found studies suggesting that resveratrol supports the natural production of testosterone, not artificially, like hormone therapy, but gently by activating the body's own mechanisms. Moreover, its effect was especially pronounced when the wine was consumed at a specific time, in the evening, 30 to 60 minutes before sleep. That's when the body begins its nightly recovery processes. Cortisol levels normalize, growth hormone synthesis is activated, and sleep quality improves. Together, these factors promote better health, especially in older men. One of his patients, an elderly engineer named Richard, agreed to test the approach. He was skeptical, but he trusted James. A month later, he came back for a follow-up and said, "I feel like I remembered who I was." He was falling asleep more easily, less irritable, in a better mood. No magic, no euphoria, just a steady sense of balance and vitality. James realized it wasn't just the biochemistry of the wine that mattered, but how it interacted with the body's natural rhythms. Not every wine would have the same effect, and timing was essential. He began collecting stories. Patients shared their observations, and almost all of them emphasized the key was not quantity, but quality and ritual. James was becoming increasingly aware that this wasn't just a discovery. It was a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern medicine. In that glass, there was not just a drink, but science, emotion, and respect for the body. When Dr. James began sharing his observations with colleagues, he noticed that most were intrigued by the benefits of resveratrol, but only a few grasped the deeper meaning of his discovery. It wasn't just about chemistry. The true power of Gep's wine lay not merely in its composition, but in how it was woven into daily life. That's what truly struck James. He started paying closer attention to his patients' evening routines and discovered that for many, the evening had become a time overloaded with information and anxiety. News, screens, phone calls, leftover work tasks. No transition to rest, no self-care. Gepe did things differently. He drank wine not simply as a beverage, but as part of a deliberate ritual. In the evenings, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he would sit outside with his wife, play soft music, pour a glass of wine, and simply be. No rush, no plans, no gadgets. It was a time not for input, but for restoration. And James realized this was the true value. The wine served only as a key. The real power was in the ritual, in the intention to give oneself an evening of quiet, trust, and peace. He began recommending not just wine to his patients, but an evening ritual of restoration. One man, who had been struggling after a stressful layoff, shared that for the first time in 6 months, he was able to fall asleep without medication, just by allowing himself half an hour of silence and a glass of wine before bed. He didn't just relax. He felt a sense of dignity return. "I feel like I belong to myself again," he said. Those words confirmed it for James. The ritual worked not only on the body, but on the soul. It wasn't about drinking to escape, but about mindfully experiencing the moment, to make it intentional. A sip, like a period at the end of a long sentence. Music, soft lighting, maybe a gentle stretch or a walk to the nearest park. All of it became part of a space where the body received the signal, you are safe, you can relax, you can begin to heal. The ritual required no money or special conditions. It required respect for oneself, a way to remember, you still matter, you deserve care. And if every evening ends with that feeling, life slowly begins to take on a new tone. More and more often, James heard from his patients, "I don't just sleep better, I live better." As Dr. James began systematizing his experience, he realized the power of the ritual lies in the details. For evening wine to truly work as a tool for restoration, 3 simple but important conditions must be met: quality, portion, and timing. These principles became the foundation of his recommendations, especially for older men seeking to reconnect with themselves and their bodies. The first is wine quality. Not just any red will do. It's essential to choose dry varieties rich in polyphenols and grown without excessive chemicals. The best options include Nero d'Avola, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Pinot Noir. These wines are packed with resveratrol and other beneficial compounds. The main criteria are no sugar, no artificial flavorings, no stabilizers. Naturalness is the strongest ally in this practice. The second is portion size. Here, James was strict. No more than 150 matters. That's one standard glass, enough to support the body without burdening the liver, disrupting sleep, or overwhelming the system. More doesn't mean better. A small dose acts as a gentle aid, not a shock. The third is timing. The ideal window is 30-60 minutes before bedtime, after a light dinner. This is when the body enters recovery mode, and every signal becomes especially meaningful. James emphasized, evening is not just the end of the day, it's the beginning of healing. The right timing gives the ritual its strength, but the setting also matters. A single lamp casting warm light, calming music, the TV turned off. It's not just about the wine. It's about giving yourself a pause. A moment when a man can remember he's not just a function, not just a role. Father, worker, neighbor. He is a human being, and that human deserves care. Some patients added a walk to the ritual, even just 10 minutes in the yard or around the house. Others included breathing exercises or stretching. All of it enhanced the effect. One man said, "It's not about the alcohol. It's about the fact that, for the first time in a long while, I listened to myself." James realized he hadn't just created a routine, he had built a foundation. The ritual became an anchor, helping people feel grounded, regardless of age or condition. It demanded no effort, yet transformed perception. Because the body is a sensitive ally. If approached with attention, it always responds with gratitude. And, perhaps with just one glass and a moment of stillness, true change can begin.